Hello and welcome to the first episode of I Can't Cook and Neither Can't You. Today we're going to be talking about bone broth. The purpose of this show is to simplify things, simplify the cooking process, and show you how to make bone broth from the perspective of someone who can't cook, like me. So let's get to it. One of the ways we're going to simplify this process is with the ingredients. We're not going to have different flavored bone broth, beef, pork, or chicken. We're just going to throw that all into one pot. So the ingredients are going to be pig's feet and chicken feet. Those will give you they're an excellent source of collagen, which turns into gelatin after you cook it. We'll go into the benefits of those later on. And then pick one of the following: femur bone, beef knuckle, or any neck bones, whether it be pork, beef, or veal. And if you've accumulated any bones throughout the week, throw those in your freezer and you can throw in the leftover bones. Good sources for these bones are Asian supermarkets. They'll have these prepackaged, or any family-run supermarkets with full butchers will usually have these bones. In addition, you can buy some of these bones online. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to simplify this process. So we're not going to have any bullshit processes involved. If you've done any research on making bone broth, you may have seen some suggestions for using apple cider vinegar. I don't know why the internet loves apple cider vinegar so much. It's quite disgusting, and we're not going to use it here. In addition, you don't need to bake your bones before. That's just a bullshit extra process. You're going to get all the collagen out. It's going to become gelatin just fine by just boiling it, like I'm going to show you later. And that last picture, any meatheads that are watching this are wondering what the heck that is. It's cheesecloth. If you've done any research on making bone broth, quite often they suggest straining it through cheesecloth. Like meatheads like us have cheesecloth laying around, or let alone know what cheesecloth is. So we're not going to need any of this crap, all right? So we're going to simplify the process. Before we go into how to make the bone broth, let's just really quick go over the benefits. It's pretty simple. It's healthy. You can use it to lose weight because it's satiating. You can also use it as a meal supplement to gain weight and replace some of the bullshit muscle builder products that you might be using. If you're watching this video, you probably are already aware that bone broth is healthy, but we'll just go over this really quick. It's a good source for collagen and gelatin. That's because of the pig's feet and the chicken feet. Collagen and gelatin can help with healthy hair, healthy skin, as well as can help with your joints, lowering inflammation. I've had knee problems and swelling in my knees from the rugby and football training I've done over the years, and it's helped with that. It helps with gut function. Apparently there's something out there called leaky gut it helps with. It's helped me with consistently going number 2, which is probably too much information for you. It's also high in amino acids you can't find elsewhere, like glycine and other amino acids, which are hard to pronounce and harder to spell. It probably has some flux capacitor juice in it, which makes time travel possible. It's got a lot of shit in it. Just look it up. Another reason to drink bone broth is that it can help you lose weight. Bone broth is quite satiating, which is a pompous way of saying it makes you full. Here's an idea for a way if you want to lose some weight. Say you got a big old butt and you want to make your big old butt smaller. You can try this for your diet. This is what I do. I have a big cup of bone broth for breakfast. Then I have another cup for lunch. Sometimes I add greens or eggs or anchovies, which I'll show you later at the end on how to drink bone broth. And then for dinner, you have meat and greens, and you eat those meat and greens until you're completely full. Don't walk away from the table hungry. And throughout the day, just drink water and coffee. No sugar drinks. Alternatively, if you're actually trying to gain weight and on a muscle building program, bone broth can be a great meal supplement. So you can add bone broth in between meals because it's an excellent source of protein, and it's a great way to put down eggs. Back when I was playing rugby and football and I was trying to gain weight, I would try to put down as many boiled eggs in between meals as I can, which can be quite challenging. Or I would drink a lot of those bullshit chocolate flavored muscle builder drinks, which are just full of sugar or fake sugar, which are obviously not healthy. So you can use this to replace those bullshit sugar drinks because sugar obviously is something you want to avoid.
Azúcar es el diablo.
All right, step one in the process is you just want to give your bones a quick rinse. Just wash them really quickly with some warm water, just like you would with vegetables. All right, for step two, we're going to chuck all the bones in the pot. You can see here on the chicken feet, they have little claws. Some videos suggest that you cut those off. That'll take way too long. We're not going to do that. Screw that. We're just going to throw them in the pot. Now for that third option that I showed in the ingredients, I'm going to show two here. Femur bone, which you can see that has bone marrow in it. I'm going to show an extra step later on. You don't have to do it, but an extra step to get that bone marrow off, to make sure you capture that. This bone marrow this femur bone was chopped into 3 pieces. I'm going to take one out because I usually make a second batch when I go through the process of making bone broth. One of the other options was the neck bone. So here's an example of pig neck bone. The butcher chops it up into a bunch of different pieces so you can fit it into the pot. There you go. Now the extra bones, this is optional as well. That week I made this. We had chicken. I threw those chicken bones in the freezer and I add that into the pot. Be sure when you do the femur bone, if you're going to do the extra step, that you put it parallel so it's not so the bone marrow won't fall out for that extra step. Then you're going to add water. Pretty simple here. Just throw some warm water in it, and then you're on to the next step. For step 4, we're going to cook the suckers. 12 to 24 hours on low is about how long you want to cook it for. If you're going to do the extra step, which I'm going to show here in a little bit to get the bone marrow out, cook it on high for the first hour. We're going to go through an extra step here. Feel free to skip this. You don't need to do it, but if you really want to make sure you capture all that bone marrow that was in the femur bone, or if you're using a beef knuckle, there's some nice bone marrow in those. You can do this extra step. So first you're going to fish out that femur bone. It helps if you remembered where you put it. And set that in a bowl. So get all those pieces out that have the bone marrow into the bowl. And then you're going to punch that bone marrow out. Be sure to have whatever container you're going to use for the bone broth ready. I use old pickle jars. And then when you punch it out, I like to use a chopstick. So you're just going to go through this process. As you'll see, it should be pretty loose depending on how long you've cooked it. Sometimes it'll sort of snag inside, and you have to sort of use your hands to pull it out, as you can see here. But just go through this process to punch that extra bone broth out. And you can make sure you can capture it. If it looks kind of gross to you and you think you might have problems eating that later, just wait around to the end. I'll help you get through that. Skipping ahead here a little bit, once you've finished getting all that bone marrow out, put the femur bone back into your broth, and then simply pour that marrow that you worked so hard to get out into whatever container you're going to use. Feel free to use a utensil if you like. I use my finger because I rarely pick my nose, and it's going to be boiled later, so any germs in there will be cooked out. Then just be sure to turn it back to low after you've done that extra step. All right, once it's been 12 to 24 hours, you're ready to dump and strain your bone broth. Now, we're not going to scrape anything off here. We're just going to put it through a spaghetti strainer into a pot and then use that to transition into the jars. As you can see here, that jar has the extra step. That was the bone marrow from the femur bone. That's what it looks like after it's been cooling for a while. Now, for this process, I should point out, I did a terrible job on this video of dumping it. I lost a lot into the drain. I probably should have strained some out. I'm pretty good at dumping it because I make bone broth at least once a week, but I did a terrible job in this video. So if you're new at it, be sure to strain some out. As you can see, a lot of that bone broth went down the sink, unfortunately. I still got a fair amount, but that's just more reason to use a spoon and strain some out before you do a big dump, like I did in this video here. So you dump as much of it as you can out. There'll be some bones that are left in the pot, the crock pot, as well as some will be in your strainer. So you take the strainer and then you dump the bones back into the crock pot. I do this because I usually make a second batch. Now with the femur bones, you can use those for your next batch. So be sure to pull those back out if you want to use them for the next batch. You can make 2 or 3 batches with that femur bone. They still have some nutrition in there, so that's why I took those out. Now, as far as putting them in the jars go, I did a big, I tried to do it fast and do one big dump here, but I did lose a little bit more there. Probably good to just use a spoon or a big soup ladle, if you will, and put it in the jars first. I have 2 big pickle jars, which usually will be enough for most of the broth. Sometimes I just have to use like a third smaller jar to capture the rest there. So you fill them up to the top, and that's pretty much it. Then you're ready to go. Put them in the fridge. This is optional, but if you've gone through the process to make this bone broth, you might as well make it a second batch. At least that's my theory. So I throw in some more pig's feet, a little bit more chicken feet, and some femur bone, and make a second batch if I'm going to go through this process. And of course, you leave those old bones in there from your first batch because there's still some nutrients in there that you can suck out of those bones, and that's how you can make a second batch. All right, now that we have our bone broth, let's talk about eating it. As you can see, the bone broth will have a thick layer of fat on it. Be sure not to waste that. We definitely want to eat that fat. Fat being bad for you and cause of heart disease is quite outdated. I think most people are coming around to the fact that sugar is the culprit and fat is actually quite healthy. So be sure to save that. Don't throw it out. As you can see in the video, the bone broth will be in a gelatin form. That's because of all the collagen from those chicken feet and pig's feet. And the collagen becomes gelatin after we've got it out of the bones. So we're going to heat that up, and you'll see once it's heated up that it just looks pretty similar to regular soup broth. When you're doing this, you know the fat kind of hangs on the top of the jar. Be sure to punch it down. It'll just make it easier when you go for more bone broth later. This is the jar that had the femur bone. The bone marrow that I punched out earlier. So you'll see that in a little bit here. If you didn't do that extra step, don't worry about it. You just won't have that. So the first option I'm going to show you on how to eat it is pretty simple. We're going to eat it plain. This is what the bone broth looks like cooked up. Some of those little things on top are the femur bone, bone marrow, which I'll show you here. You can see that it's sort of like a globular substance, which is that bone marrow. It's quite good for you, though, and I do enjoy the flavor. So that won't be there if you did not do that extra step. These are little examples of the femur bone marrow. So don't be afraid if that's not in there, and if it grosses you out too much, toughen up. All right, in addition to eating it plain, I'm going to show you how you can eat it with an egg. It's pretty simple. You just crack the egg into whatever you're going to eat it out of. You have the bone broth, ideally was boiling, because that boiling bone broth is then going to cook that egg for you. So the way I like to do it is I like to whip it up first. You don't have to do this, but this just gives it sort of a more consistent flavor throughout. If you're trying to gain weight, I'm using this as a muscle supplement. Feel free to crack a bunch of eggs, maybe even a larger bowl. You could easily get down 3 or 4 eggs with a big bowl of bone broth. And as long as it's very, very hot, that bone broth should cook that egg for you. But I'm just doing an example of just one. This might be what I might do for my afternoon meal when I do the bone broth. If I'm feeling super hungry, I might mix it with an egg, and then you whip it up. And it gives it quite a good flavor. If you like flavor of eggs, and who doesn't, this is quite good bone broth. So that's it. You whip it up. Had a little fancy salt in there too. And you got some delicious bone broth with egg. Any meatheads watching this in Australia just got a boner when they saw me get an egg involved. Isn't that right, Aussie Billy? Oh, we're very impressed. Australia's boner was the size of New Zealand. All right, next up we're going to show you how to eat bone broth with greens. And Australia just went limp. So the greens I have there I'm showing you is some spinach. I just got a bag of spinach at the best grocery store in America. And as you can see, I'm just going to put it in the same container I use to consume the bone broth. You put it in boiling, and if you have the spinach in the fridge, it'll kind of cool it down to give your bone broth a good temperature. So it's pretty simple. If you let it sit for a little while, the spinach will cook a little bit and be a little bit easier to eat. All right, last up, I'm going to show you how to add anchovies. I'm adding the anchovies to the bone broth with greens, but you can do either or, of course. So you just have a can of anchovies. That's anchovies with olive oil. I don't like to waste any food, and the olive oil mixed with the bone broth gives it a good flavor. So I put that in there, and then you chuck the anchovies in. It's pretty simple. You can use a utensil, of course, but I am not afraid of germs, so I use my finger. And that's it. It's going to have more protein, and anchovies are an excellent source of protein as well as omega-3s. So very healthy and very filling as well. For those of you watching this that are thinking, oh, I don't like the taste of fish and I can't stomach the taste of fish, you're about to see my 8-year-old daughter who loves anchovies take a bite. So if she can tough out anchovies, so can you. Now, if you're concerned about eating the bone broth, maybe if you're doing the extra step with the bone marrow, or you're going to try to improve your diet with the anchovies or whatever it is, and you're concerned about texture or flavor or whatever it is that makes it difficult for you to eat it, you don't like the idea of consuming that fat, whatever it is, I have a simple way for you to overcome that. And it's just toughen up. That's pretty much it. Human beings have accomplished way more amazing things than you, little wimpy you, being able to get through whatever phobias you have of this food. So that's pretty much it. Toughen up. When you were younger and playing sports and your coach told you to do something, there's no way you would just whine and make excuses, but yet we're grown-ass adults and we act like little babies when it comes to food because we don't like the flavor or the idea of eating anchovies makes us sick. That's it. Toughen up. Toughen up and you'll be healthier. All right, that's it of the first and possibly only episode of I Can't Cook bone broth. If you do end up using this video to make bone broth, post some pictures or send them to me, or send a video of somebody toughening up and drinking it for the first time, getting over whatever phobias they have. And of course, I'd greatly appreciate it if you subscribe because I like money.